All right, let's get started. How's everybody doing? Thumbs up in the mutescape. So I'm really excited about this one. I mean, I'm excited about all of them, but I'm very excited about today's lesson, today's topic. It's just really interesting to me, and it always reveals a lot of really interesting new perspectives and ideas in people's businesses, including my own. So this is the third part of phase one. So phase one has three parts: you, your work, and the culture. And this is kind of how we cycle through a lot of different parts of this program. It's like starting with the foundation, the starting place, your voice, your creativity, who you are, how you operate, what works, moving from that to what it is you do and who you do your work with and for, and, you know, meeting in relationship, you know, your voice meets others. And then going macro, going out into the larger culture and the larger world, and where your work sits in that context, which is what, to some degree, here come the trucks. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
So what was that?
You were getting funky, or it was going in and out a little.
I think it was because there was a giant truck. I'm going to go close my windows. I'm going to edit this part out, but I'm going to go close my windows. Hang on. Okay, that is a bazillion times better on my end. So now we expand our awareness out further to the rest of the world and the culture that our work is embedded in. And this part is really, really important and goes beyond simply thinking about it in terms of positioning, like our position in our markets, although that's really important as well. We don't tend to think about and relate to the larger culture that our work is situated in with a big sense of agency. You know, like I think we're raised in societies where we're kind of trained to think that culture is something that's just there and it happens to us, and that our job is to respond to it, you know? Like we get trained to kind of feel like we're the consumers of culture, rather than the producers of culture some of the time. And so we tend to feel like we're creating our own individual thing that has to kind of go up against this big monolith of whatever we think culture is out there. So often you'll hear people in the business space talk about branding as a way to try to capture attention, you know, a way to differentiate yourself, you know, all these words and phrases that have to do with responding to or adjusting to or adapting to this thing out there that we see as a given, you know. And the language is, in a way, its own way, kind of passive, you know, like it doesn't keep in mind that we are the active co-creators of culture all the time, that we have the opportunity with our businesses not just to conform to things in the larger culture or reject things in the larger culture, but to actively make culture with our work. So positioning, yes, but we are positioning inside of something that is active and dynamic and moving and evolving, that we are co-creating. So our positioning is a very active, creative experience. So it's really powerful to take that attitude. You know, when people see you put your work out into the world in a way that very actively creates the culture that you want to create around it, they experience the promise that your brand is making just by coming into contact with it. It's like they witness the change that you're talking about because you're expressing the change. You're being the change that you're trying to make, to use kind of a cliche thing, but it's really true. So the first step in changing culture with your brand is to know that you can do that. That is the very first step. It's like a mindset thing. So in your own way, you can really choose where you stand, who you are, what the work is. Let the work be exactly what it is, even if that's something that's always changing. Really ground into your sovereignty and your work's sovereignty as a creator and as an agent of change and as a relator. And you can be very uncompromising about that. And by uncompromising, again, I don't mean rigid. I don't mean you have to know everything there is to know about your work. But I think the central project of building a beautiful brand is to create the brand without getting stuck in these questions of having to adapt to or deal with or respond to some larger culture. You are the originator of the culture, right? We all are. We're doing this together collectively. So this can be really challenging because we really care about what other people think. We want to belong. We want to be seen as credible, serious, professional. We actually want to use language that resonates with people because it's familiar. There are places where conformity with what's out there is useful strategically, and we get to roll with all of that and use strategic conformity and use belonging and participate really fully and relate really fully, but with this perspective that we are sovereign beings within this world of branding. So it can bring up a lot of like the boo-boos of our childhoods, right? Like stuff about how we fit in the stylescape of childhood and all of that stuff. So is this making sense so far? Does anyone have a comment or a question before we move into the nuts and bolts and the prompts? Thumbs up. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So where I want us to start with our prompts and our journals today is to first ask this question, which is what are the subcultures and the cultures out there in the world that your business participates in? I'm actually going to grab my notes that I took about this the other day because I have some examples for you of what I'm talking about. Yes. So you could think about this as, where are the places that you're doing your marketing? Why did I just go out of focus? Okay. You can think about it as what are the industries that your work gets associated with? I was just talking to Susan earlier, who's one of our founding members, who's a massage therapist, and she was saying, well, a lot of what she does, she doesn't really associate with the massage world and with that culture, but most other people do when they find out she does massage, right? So it's what industries or genres or categories or populations even does your work get associated with? What cultures does it get associated with? What industries is it a part of? What cultures and microcultures of people does it appeal to? And you can start with the great overculture, the country that you live in, the economic system that you're in. But I suggest making kind of a sketch or an image of this. And I'm going to share an example that I came up with, that I just came up with, you know, hypothetically, completely hypothetically. Get my layers out here. Welcome to my little Photoshop world. Okay. So I imagined that one of you is somebody who does legal services for businesses in the salon industry. Okay. So I started imagining kind of a Venn diagram. So the legal world, the legal industry. And as soon as I say that, you probably each have this kind of picture in your mind of what that world looks like and feels like. Right? Like I have a lot of stuff that I've seen on TV, a lot of stuff that I've seen on magazines, all the advertisements I've ever seen, the legal services I see online. I even see colors. I can kind of see this brand appear in my mind. Pay attention to those visual things that appeal to you or appear to you. She would also be working in the beautification industry. So any of those parts of, you know, the overlapping industries that has to do with women mostly, you know, modifying or beautifying our bodies, our hair, makeup, all of those kinds of things. I think of salons as being a part of that world. But I'm also thinking that, you know, as she's marketing and, you know, putting her work out there, and maybe she, because of some of the content of the things she talks about, she might overlap with the self-care industries and with the bigger cultural conversations that are happening around self-care and around the side. I think there's an overlap here where stuff about beauty and stuff about health and self-care and you know, a whole range from really oppressive to really liberating perspectives can happen. So as you're doing your Venn diagram, you can also think about it in terms of cultural conversations that are happening. And then I imagine, well, you know, a lot of that starts to overlap with things that we see as like lifestyle brands. Like I'm thinking of Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop magazine. And I don't know a lot about the legal industry, but someone who did, and this hypothetical person that we're talking about here, if she does, she could probably start to add some sub-circles around legal, of some of the subcultures within legal. So this could probably break down further and further and further, but I wanted to give you a sense of how this kind of sketching out could start and give you a little bit of time here. We'll check in at 5 minutes and see how you're doing. And just let you start to map this out and let it be kind of fragmented and nonlinear as you're figuring out the cultures, the subcultures, the cultural conversations that your work is associated with, refers to, draws heavily from, you know, what's your relationship to these industries? If you have any questions, you can just unmute right now, or you can put them in the chat and ask away. And otherwise, just get started drawing and sketching and see what appears for you. And the one thing I didn't do with this drawing was do the larger overculture. I mean, I think to put this inside a giant circle of like advanced capitalism in the United States would be useful in 2019. I'm going to give you another 30 seconds and then check in with you. People need more time? I haven't done this exercise before, so I don't know. Give you another few seconds to finish up your sketching. There you go. Everybody's back. All right. Let's get back to speaker view. So did anyone struggle with that? Did anyone come up with something that you kind of weren't aware of? Any surprises? I'd love to hear a couple brief reports on what you learned. Even just report what industries you wrote down. You can just, there's just a few of us here, so you can just unmute and jump in when you're ready.
I was surprised to see a couple of areas, like the small business entrepreneur, ladypreneur kind of world, which is a lot of the people I work with, and not because I fall into that. And then also the kind of the zero waste DIY personal care kind of make your own toothpaste world has got sort of different cultural things. Those were the most surprising things. But I obviously the idea of American capitalism isn't so much applicable to me, but international digital capitalism, the online capitalism is definitely the wider sphere in which I'm operating.
Yeah. And what were the main sort of unsurprising categories?
Oh, so dentistry and cosmetic dentistry, beauty, natural health. I put down woo-woo, but that's kind of all the energy healing and the shamans and witches and tarot readers and astrologers. Self-care, personal development, detoxing, and all the diets, the kind of detoxing kind of diets that go with that. There was a lot. I filled up a whole page. So.
Nice. Yeah, the word ecosystem comes to mind. We're all a part of these kind of interconnected ecosystems of commerce and culture. All right, who else? What did you get?
One thing that surprised me, I came up, and I don't know if this was libraries, and I thought of that. Collections and documentation and how that fits in with my fashion, and I came up with kind of sustainability too, and the thrifting and recycling, and art brought in process and images, and the overlap seemed to be like techniques and visuals and storytelling. I was trying to think of like the classroom or the child's play, and how bringing your inner child back and with dress up. And
it sounds like you really went in the direction of the cultural conversations, which is great. And I also think that, to embed those in and around the different kind of industries, like it seems like that just the fine art industry and then the crafting industry. I mean, I don't know if these are singular or plural. I think they're plural. And the what's the word? Like the world of makers who are self-represented, sell their own work, and small business owners.
Self-employed
people. Yeah. This is so good, seeing Melior's, drawing and hearing about the interconnected conversations that came up for you, Meredith. Just in making this visible, it also helps us look at where we want to shift our conversation, and what conversations and what parts of industries and what, groupings of people, are we most interested in connecting with, and which parts are we moving away from? How do we want to navigate through these overlapping circles? That's cool. Thank you. Julie or Joanna, would one of you like to share what came up?
Sure. I was surprised that the biohacking and productivity industry popped up for me. And that popped up because of the whole fascination with lucid dreaming and how we can be more productive in our sleep through lucid dreaming.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. It's very male-centered, as you could imagine.
Right.
And then everything else was not a surprise. It was, I think just getting it all on paper was very helpful. So there's definitely the coaching industry, which of course leads into the entrepreneur kind of realm as well. Self-care's in there as well. There's definitely the healing industry, so energy medicine, meditation, mindfulness, those sorts of therapeutic as well. And then there's also an activism piece. I don't know that that's an industry, but definitely, sure. Yeah, an activism piece, feminism, human rights. People really who are feeling the call to do something, but not really knowing exactly what to do.
I think you just bringing that up is really important, because this helps clarify for me that what I'm asking you to do is not just define industries and cultures, but also movements, potentially. That's, that's really important, not to put everything through the lens of capital and commerce, but movements as well are really important. I love that. And what you're making me realize, and I've got a new prompt coming up for all of you, just coming out of listening to you, is also this piece about, now that you have this map, you can look at your work differently in different places of the map in terms of what you offer, and the beliefs and the values and the mission and the vision and the message of your work does different things in these different cultural spaces. So in the biohacking space, some of the things you say might be really controversial. You might take big issue with some of the ways of thinking about being human that are being expressed in those spaces.
Yeah.
And you might have things to offer that are wildly useful in those spaces. And in the, spiritual development world or something, some of those very same messages might be just very run of the mill, so I think we could really go through these different cultural spaces and say, what does my work have to offer in this space?
Yeah.
What are the stories and the value systems in each of these spaces, to generalize, we generalize in this exercise, that can benefit from my work, that can, what happens in relationship with my work. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Joanna.
So I don't know if anything was incredibly surprising, but I did have coaching and life coaching in that whole genre, and then personal growth, and under there specifically with writing, somewhat the self-care industry. It's not what I talk about a lot, but I get that people would associate that with me. In the spiritual world, healers and writing. And then there's dance is a part of my work. So there's ecstatic dance and movement. And even when I don't do that, people associate me with that. And in general, artists, writers, and body acceptance and fat acceptance, because I do talk about that some, not as my work, just because I love it. And I think even if I didn't, just being a fat woman who dares to be seen in the world kind of makes that part of just what I do.
Right. By virtue of the fact that that oppression is out there,
Yeah.
just being you has a role. All right, so let's move into the next little piece, and I have these questions set up, and I'm gonna adjust them a little bit based on what I just learned from all of you listening. This is so fun. So spend some time now, go towards the places on the map that you just drew that feel most sort of central or most important. Start there, and then you can start cycling out to the, all the kind of more peripheral things, and do a little writing about what are the main stories or kind of most collective shared kind of cultural shared values and stories that you see in those spaces. So like I mentioned in listening to Julie, it can really tap into what is being said here in these industries or in this movement or in this cultural conversation about what it means to be human, about what it means to be fulfilled or successful as a human. What are the aspirations being expressed in those spaces? What's being shown as important or not important? If it's a commercial space, you could, notice the marketing messages that you see, or even in something like an activist space, what are the kind of slogans that you see over and over? And just take a little inventory of, it's like stepping back from each of those cultures and saying, okay, what's being shown as important here? And I want you to do this in two ways. One is to write about it. But another thing you could do is, before you write about it, just kind of close your eyes and stop and say, when I think of this industry or this movement or this culture, does it have a look and feel to me? Is it a loud place? Is it a quiet place? Is it, what kind of things do I see? Like, when I thought of the legal industry, I thought of a lot of navy blue and gold. Right? So however that kind of imagery and that felt sense comes to you about that industry, start there and see what starts to come out. And this time I think I'm going to set the timer for about 10 minutes so that you can really spend time feeling into these different cultural spaces. And do ask questions of me in the chat, or if you want to discuss something, you can unmute after kind of flagging me in the chat, and I will mute myself. That's been about 10 minutes. I'll give you another 30 seconds to finish up your sentence. Take notes. Actually, I'll just start asking you the next question because you can just keep writing. The next question is right on the heels of the first one, which is now that you've thought about the stories and the messages and the values that are being expressed in these industries and movements and cultures in which you work, I want you to write a little bit about each of those spaces and what your work does in those spaces. What is the role of your work in that space? How does it belong to and fit into and support and even celebrate the messages that in the stories that you find there? Where does your work or the message of your work diverge from whatever is dominant in that cultural space? What do you reject? And what's neither about conformity nor rejection, but is a fresh, new, or complicating in a good way contribution? What's the contribution that your work makes to that specific conversation, culture, movement, or industry? And let yourself be playful about this. This isn't really about analysis. It's about just really, it is in a playful way, like just really feeling into your work as this lively organism in this ecosystem, you know, making a ruckus. So I will put these questions in the chat as well. And I'm not sure how much time to give you here. So I'd like you each, when you feel like you've really explored this, to go ahead and just say, I'm ready in the chat. I'm going to guess it's somewhere between another 5 and 10 more minutes. You don't have to go super deep, but just, you know, make some lists about each of these things, whatever comes to your mind in response to these questions.
I'm done.
Anybody else feeling finished? We've got 2 people who are done. Almost. Okay, let's take 1 more minute. Those of you who are done can breathe and drink water and stretch. Okay. Now I really want to hear what came up. What did you discover in this last round? Questions, insights, fresh thoughts, struggles. Let's hear a couple of reports, and then we've got the next thing we're going to do after this is a meditation. So this is our last talky bit, although we might report back from the meditations actually. Who would like to share?
I realized that I kind of wrote about the fine art and the fashion world, and I realized how male dominated they are.
Mm-hmm.
And elitist for what success might be, what people think success is.
Yes.
And how I've really always not wanted to participate in that. So looking at how my vision is more human and connected to everybody. And I think also with all the gender changing and just the way the world's changing now, I don't know. I think that's just why trying to get clarity on what my new design phase is for my next section of my life, part of my life as a grown-up.
Yeah.
No, all good, thought-provoking. Yeah, could spend some time here. So.
Yeah, another great question that I'm going to throw into the workbook. I didn't, there's not time to do all the questions I want to ask you all in each of these classes, but one of the questions I'm going to put into the workbook is what are some of the undeniable changes, or even one undeniable change that's happening in your industry or industries or subcultures, however you want to define that, that kind of sets the stage for what you do. And also as an opportunity for what you do and how you present it. So, what you were saying about the male dominated worlds of these kind of more traditional industries, and then, all these big changes that are happening that are making so many more things possible. So keep your eyes peeled for that question in the workbook.
It's also curious to me that the people that as I've been following you, it's like there's very few men in this culture, this culture here.
Yep. All right. Who else?
I'll go.
Great.
So the last time we were on a call, first of all, a lot of Wizard of Oz imagery has really been coming up for me lately. In dreams that people bring to me in just sort of everyday walking around, just like glimpses that remind me of sort of Wizard of Oz things and meditations and analogies that I come up with. And so as far as the coaching industry is concerned, like I keep having this image of me being Toto and like pulling the curtain back. I want to do it in a playful way, but I think there's so many coaches out there that are, really suffering in other areas of their life. So if they're a relationship coach, maybe they're suffering financially, or they're suffering with their health. If they're a business coach, their family life is suffering, or because of the nature of entrepreneurship, like it's very easy, I think, and this is perhaps my own wounding as well, because my dad was an entrepreneur, and so it was like that was his thing, was work, and really was not nourishing for the family system. So there's a part of me that wants to be like, hey, like, because to me the coaching industry can tend to be so polished, like there's a certain look. When you were talking about the looks, like I see a white background, and I see gold lettering, and I see that font. I don't know what that font is, but
I know that font.
With that quote.
Yes.
And just to sort of like make it okay, make it okay that we struggle in these other areas of our lives, and that area might kind of shift. It might be health, and then it might be relationships, and then it might be money, but make it okay for everybody to soften into that, instead of feeling like this persona has to be out there and has to be polished and has to be perfect.
That's great. I love that. I love that sharing, and how visual it is. The pulling back of the curtain, the exposing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Thank you.
Anyone else? It's not required, but if you want to let us know what came up, I'd love to hear.
I had the same image, Julie. The gold, and mine had like gold letters with a pink line around the box. It's like, oh yeah, that's coaching.
Yeah.
And I mean, it didn't surprise me, because I feel like I feel this way a lot, but to be able to put in words like where I don't fit in, and what I reject has really become such like a foundational piece of my work, like the fix-it culture, or creating change in behavior without addressing the root cause of the behavior, or even the notion that an amazing human experience happens because you have things. And it's like, even in the coaching, it is inherently all about behavior and what you're achieving. And I just don't give a flying fuck about those level of goals in my work. It's rarely addressed. Why you it's addressed in certain ways, and it was like interesting to even see, yes, that does fit into my work in a very different way than when I was a coach. 8 years ago, I would have said to you 100%, my work is focused on creating the things that you want for yourself in your life. And that it's like it comes in at the very end, and it is important, but it's much lower down on the totem pole. And just seeing that in all of those industries, in personal growth, in spirituality, even like this quick fix, do these steps, ascend the pain, all of things that I just no longer have much interest in. Yeah, it was nice to kind of see it more clearly than just feeling the discomfort of it.
Yes. Oh, seems like there's so much there for you to write and define and put out there for people. so much course correcting you can do.
Yes.
At least the parts of that are fun for you.
Yeah.
We don't, you know, it's like we get to decide what parts that we're just not going to pay any attention to at all. Like that's not part of our brand. It's not part of where we need to put our minds, you know, but it's also a very powerful service to offer people, the gift of the alternate perspective. Yeah. That contradicts, you know, the larger overculture. I'm hearing in this whole conversation, the larger overculture of capital, you know, and the values of the larger overculture. Yeah,
for sure.
Cool. Thanks.
Joanna, what you said was reminding me that when I didn't get to do all of the circles that I had, but I did coaching and I did activism and I did the healing world. And it's sort of like distilled down to this basic belief of we're all broken and we need to be fixed. And I'm so like, no, we're all perfect exactly the way that we are. We just need to remember that. Yeah, so what you said really, I really resonated with that. Thanks for sharing that.
Yours, did you want to say anything?
So there's kind of the world of dentistry and oral hygiene products and all of that mainstream stuff. I'm very kind of in opposition and counter arguing and disrupting and all of that. And then there's kind of the whole natural healing woo-woo world, well, most of it. There's a lot where I fit in, and I'm adding this whole new thing to the conversation that people on the whole aren't thinking about oral health at all in those natural healing spaces. So I'm adding this thing that otherwise fits in really well and kind of is the missing puzzle piece. And then there's kind of the outliers of there, which is the people who are really rigidly anti dentistry, anti root canals, and anti, you know, you have to pull out all the amalgams, you have to pull out all the root canals, you have to detox every blah blah blah, and it's a very rigid kind of paranoid, anxious position. And I have to take a very strong kind of middle ground, because I'm constantly being as challenged by that end of the spectrum as I am by the mainstream dentistry, that their perspective is the one true right way. And my position is like, well, everyone's different, and we look at your situation case by case and make a decision about what's right for you. And that doesn't fit into either model. But that's where I fit, where I am. So, yeah.
Fresh thinking.
Yeah.
Non-dogmatic, fresh thinking seems like a key part of your voice and the space and the reality of what you do. It's great. All right, so we're going to do a little meditation. We might do 2 small ones. We'll see how long this one wants to be. I like to just be intuitive about it. And this is to get out of thinky headspace and just take a visit to our businesses and to the cultures of our businesses. So I want you to make sure you're comfortable. And this is, you know, no paper, no pens. You can have your eyes closed. Make sure your body feels well supported and, you know, as comfortable as you can in this moment. And we're going to make our way through this little journey. And when you come out, you can then write and, you know, record anything that you want to from it. So with your eyes closed or resting, you know, someplace middle distance, not focused on anything. First, just start with checking in with your body, noticing yourself being alive here in this moment as a body, embodied. Notice your breathing. Don't have to change it, but just notice that beautiful mechanism. If you're lungs filling with air, the air that you share with everyone and everything, nourishing you every minute. And in your imagination and your inner sight, allow yourself to arrive to a place in nature, likely, doesn't have to be, but a place that feels beautiful and healthy and powerful, and just a place on this planet that you really love. A real place on this planet that you really, really love to be. A favorite place. Notice the quality of the air and the quality of the light, feeling of the ground, the earth under your feet. You can let yourself have bare feet in this space if it's warm enough. And you can get really detailed if you want to with what you see and what you experience in this place, or you can just let it feel like a color or a smell or something more abstract. Just bathe yourself in this place. Connect with it. It exists in the world at this very moment along with you, so you can really just be there and connect with it. And then you start to notice that a path is appearing before you. Maybe it's something you never noticed before and you're just noticing now, or maybe it's creating itself right before you. And you begin to move along the path. It's an irresistible pull. This path wants you to come forward. It's an invitation, a beautiful invitation for you. You know you gotta go. So you begin moving along the path. And it begins to very gently slope downhill. And notice what it feels like to move through this space. Again, staying connected to your sense of touch and smell and sound, vision. And the path begins to change and turn just a bit. And as the path turns, suddenly you're aware of an opening, an entrance before you on the path. And you decide to go ahead and take the invitation and to pass through this entrance. And as soon as you pass through the entrance, you realize that you have arrived at the beautiful place of your work, your business, your art, your vocation, however you want to describe it. This is your work as a place in the universe, in this imaginal realm. And I want you to, this is the space of your work fully expressed. So you've left a lot of the small issues at the door and you've walked through to the beautiful space of your fully expressed work. And I want you to just notice what it feels like in this space. Notice the quality of light here and the quality of the air here and the sounds here. Are you alone here? Are there others here of any species? And notice what you want to do. Do you want to move through the space and discover? Do you want to dance through the space? Do you want to rest in the space? I want to be quiet for a few minutes and let you just explore this space in your own way and notice what is revealed to you here. If you feel your mind drifting away from this space, gently invite it back. It's okay if the space changes while you're there. It's all right if it's just a sensation without much detail. However it comes to you is perfect. Now we're going to take one last pass or a trip through the space. So find yourself moving through and around the space, blowing it little kisses, saying thank you, appreciating everything about this beautiful, sacred vocation space that inhabits your life. As you begin to make your way back towards the entrance through the portal that you came from, and begin to make your way back up that beautiful, inviting path, which now invites you back to your starting place in that most beautiful, special place in this world that you love so much. Allow the door or the portal entryway to close gently behind you. And when you arrive back to where you began, you can take your time just slowly emerging out of the dream and back to your journal or your paper and write or draw anything you would like to hold on to from the meditation. You can take your time writing, but as soon as any of you are wanting to report anything, you are welcome to. Again, not required, but if you'd like to, I'd love to hear.
I'll share, because that was so much cooler than I could have possibly imagined. Yeah, I don't normally see things I just normally don't see things like that. I often feel like I'm getting a vibe, but this was like crystal clear. I started off at my camp I went to as a kid, which I always say is, like, if anyone asks my most favorite beautiful place, it's this tiny little Quaker farm camp. And walked down to this space and sort of entered in, and the sky was this like vibrant light pink, like perpetual sunset, sunrise, dawn, dusk. And I was taken aback by that, because I was like, no, I don't want something so bright and cheery. Then I kept looking and I was like, no, this is right. And so that was behind it, but everything else was sort of in darker tones, in like the shadow that you get at dawn and dusk. And it was just so luscious. And it was sort of square, and around half of it there was like an upper level, and then there was a lower level. And in the center, this tree that was also like the sculpture of a bird, giant and looming, and there were everything was stone, and yet it was so comfortable. There was like stone and moss, and I just wanted to like lay my cheek down on these big stone benches and like carved out of the world around it. And then in the back, like, there was a secret little door that led into this room that was also, it was very small but perfect for like a few people, 2 people, 3 people. And it was so luscious, bright fabrics and silks, and just like everything warm and welcoming, and all stone except for the fabrics, and still like just the most comfortable place. It was just so beautiful. I did not want to leave.
Lovely. I love it. Okay, great. There's so much I want to say and ask, but I'm not. We need to let these just be what they are right now. And I think I'm going to make this meditation an audio file so we can keep doing them, because as we explore different things throughout the Visionary Syndicate, this presence of our work in the dream, which is what I call this, imaginal realm. You could call it the spirit world, the spirit reflection of our work, however you want to think of it. It may have some common elements, and it may have elements that change over time, but it gives us a lot of visual information that could be really important to our visual story of our work. There's so much that you were just shown, so much information that you were just shown. That's really important. So it's beautiful. Thank you. Would anyone else like to share?
I'll come in really quickly because I'm going to have to sign out in like 2 minutes. But mine was like the village in the movie The Avatar, or the Ewok village. It was like all these tree houses connected by little bridges, and lots of characters there. I don't know, they weren't clear who was there, but lots of people there. But I, in my identity as Titania, Queen of the Fairies, I had my pavilion and my throne where I was kind of the center of this village.
Yes, you did. Yay.
Yeah. All right, I got to go, but thanks.
Okay.
This has been great. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you
Thanks
next
so much for
time.
being here.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Any more reports? I know this kind of thing is right up your alley, Julie. Dream work. I'm a baby dream worker, so, you know.
Well, come to me. So I actually had a really difficult time at the beginning of choosing a place. And I finally settled upon, actually, in my neighborhood, there's what they call a lake. It's really a pond, but they call it a lake. And I often, when I go walking around in my neighborhood, I like to go down by the lake. And when you go on that path, there's like this bridge that's from where the lake is, and there's all these like sidewalks and lots of concrete and like openness. And then you go across the bridge, and I always call it my fairy forest, because it feels a little bit like you are walking into some kind of magical portal. Everything just changes. There's all these trees, and there's more dappled light. There's lots of shadow. You can't really see the lake anymore except through the trees. Like, it's not a clear, sort of area. And there's this tree right as soon as you walk across the bridge. That's just this magnificent tree. And I love this tree so much. And I live in this little town outside of Austin. So at least I'm outside of Austin, but it's still a fairly conservative town. And so I know that I've caused people great concern as they've come upon me hugging the tree before. But you just can't help it. It's just this amazing, beautiful tree. And this person recently built a house down there and fenced off the tree. And you can't get to it anymore. And that makes me really sad. So I was like, I'm going to my tree.
Beautiful.
And so I sat at my tree, and then the path led me towards the lake, and the lake created a portal. And at first I thought I was going down into the lake, but it turned out to be more of like an invisibility cloak situation where it sort of parted, and then I walked in and then kind of closed behind me, but it wasn't water, but it was like this shimmery, and then it was invisible. And I knew that this room, or it was kind of a round room, kind of reminded me of a yurt situation. And there were like these rugs laid out like the wheels of a spoke. And there were these different healing stations all around this spoke. And there were people, I could tell it was almost like they were plugging in. But there were other people that were, so it was like healers with healers, but it was sort of like they were plugging themselves in. And so I knew that it was a space where like, people could really be themselves, like really soften and really come to recharge and to plug in, and like no one knew that anybody was there. And then there was like a collective, so people were like getting up once they were recharged and were leaving again, but there was also like a collective sort of like meditation, for lack of a better word, going on as well, where people were sort of doing the work of creating or healing in a different realm altogether, not in the physical realm. Yeah, so that was my space.
Beautiful. Yeah. How about you, Meredith?
I had a hard time at first finding my spot. I started out here on the island on the beach, my favorite walk I like to go to, and then that took me back to Maine, where I did my favorite hike there because I was going down the trails. And then I had a kind of a hard time, like, where's there going to be a building in this amazing nature space? And but the door, envisioning the door helped, and then I was able to walk through, and it was a huge space, almost warehouse kind of, maybe similar to yours, Amy, as I'm looking at it. Lots of light. All the color came from the objects in the room, but at the end of the room was, I don't know if anyone's been to Britex Fabrics in San Francisco, but it's just this candy store of textures and fabrics, and so it was a big play, creative space, but nobody was in it. It was just me. But yeah, that's where I ended up.
Yay. Sounds about right. It sounds like your brand already, actually. That's great. All right, well, we're right at about 6:30. We're exactly at 6:30. The second meditation I was going to do with you, and then almost immediately when we went into this one, I thought, no, it doesn't make any sense at all, but it's an interesting question, might be interesting for some of you to do, is to do a similar meditation where you enter the space of your industry. And not from a critical perspective necessarily, it could even be from an appreciative or just accepting perspective, but just go visit your industry in this, you know, mirror world, and then notice the relationship between these different spaces, or non-relationship between the spaces, I think would be interesting. So I'm just putting that out there as another tool to play with potentially, and an experimental one. I haven't really done that myself yet or asked other people to do that. All right. Any last questions or anything coming up before we go? Can't get into much here, but if there's any questions that you have, we could take another 30 seconds.
So Amy,
Yes.
You're going to be gone next week.
Yes.
And you're going to put together a workbook that has included the questions that you've already asked and all the other.
Yeah, it's going to be a list of all the questions in a workbook form.
Okay.
And there's been a couple little assignments that I've left, you know, through the course of the videos. Right. I've assigned little things that you can do in between, so that's going to be in there too.
Okay.
And I'm going to post it. I leave on Monday, so I'm going to post it sometime between now and then when I get it done.
Okay.
And I'll post it in our group.
Okay.
So we'll look for it in the group. Yeah. It'll probably be a Google Drive document, and I'll post the link in our group. And probably send an email as well. I'm grateful to have, you know, to give you all a week to kind of integrate what's happened so far, and for other folks who are just coming in to catch up and all that. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. You can unmute and say goodbye.
Oops. Bye, everybody.
This is fun. Thanks for all the brilliance. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.